an Italian spy sent into Allied intelligence to betray them. He fell in love with a woman who should have been just another target. He smiled, translated papers, and taught soldiers how to ask for directions. He sat in the same rooms as the men plotting attacks, and every time Allied plans should have died, they lived. Why? Because the spy fed the Germans the perfect false map, and fed the Allies the keys that saved lives. He won battles with lies. He refused money, protection, or orders. He broke every rule and still couldn't be recruited. The generals call him dangerous. A major calls him a miracle. So tell me, when the man saving your soldiers refuses to belong to anyone, do you trust him or arrest him before he saves you again? Major Peter Drummond crushed his fifth cigarette of the hour into an ashtray already overflowing with filterless butts. The reconnaissance photos spread across his desk told a story he didn't want to read. 7 operations, 7 disasters. Not the kind of disasters where men died in heroic assaults against prepared positions. The kind where convoys drove straight into ambushes that shouldn't have existed. Where fuel depots exploded 12 hours before scheduled attacks. Where German defensive positions materialized exactly where Allied forces planned to strike. Someone was feeding the Germans their playbook. The morning sun cut through the smoke haze at an angle that hurt his eyes. He'd been at this since 0300, tracing the pattern backward. The fuel depot at Ortona, compromised 3 hours before the assault. The supply convoy outside Casino, ambushed at the exact coordinates they'd transmitted just that morning. The landing at Anzio that should have been a surprise, but met prepared machine gun nests. 43 Americans dead at Ortona, 68 at the convoy ambush. At Anzio, they'd stopped counting. Drummond lit another cigarette and stared at the map of Italy on his wall. Red pins marking failed operations clustering like a rash across the peninsula. His hands shook slightly as he drew lines between them. All the compromised operations had one thing in common. Intelligence processed through the translation pool in Building C. Building C, where a charming Italian refugee named Marco Benedetti had worked for 6 months, translating intercepted German communications and helping brief Allied officers on Italian geography. The man who taught GIs how to ask Italian girls to dance, who shared his cigarette ration when supplies ran short, who everyone liked because he laughed easily and never complained about the 15-hour shifts. Drummond had recommended Benedetti for a commendation 2 months ago. The door opened without a knock. Captain Reynolds from Signals Intelligence dropped a folder on Drummond's desk like it carried plague. Decreased from Rome. You're going to want to read these sitting down. Drummond was already sitting down. He opened the folder anyway. The intercepts were in German, with English translations paperclipped to each page. Radio transmissions from an Abwehr agent designated Aquila, Eagle, reporting from inside Allied intelligence operations in Bari. Detailed troop movements, supply schedules, attack plans. The handwriting analysis matched samples from Benedetti's personnel file. Drummond felt his stomach drop through the floor. 6 months. The man had been under their noses for 6 months, with access to nearly everything. He started reading through the intercepts chronologically, building the case that would send Benedetti to a firing squad. Then he stopped. March 2nd, Aquila reporting. Allied forces massing for assault on German positions north of Casino. Estimate 3 divisions. Attack expected dawn March 4th. Drummond pulled the operational files. March 4th. The Allies had attacked south of Casino with 2 divisions. The Germans, positioned for an assault from the north, had been caught completely off balance. It had been one of their cleanest victories in weeks. He checked the next intercept. March 7th. Major supply convoy departing Bari for Anzio via coastal route. Departure 0600 March 9th. Recommend ambush at coordinates. The convoy had taken the mountain route, arrived intact. The coordinates Benedetti had provided were for a coastal road the Allies never used. Drummond's cigarette burned down to his fingers. He barely noticed. He pulled the reconnaissance photos and laid them next to the intercepts. Every single compromised operation, every supposed leak. He traced each one backward through Benedetti's reports to German intelligence. The fuel depot at Ortona. Benedetti had reported it was at the north end of town. It was actually south. The Germans had blown up an empty warehouse and congratulated themselves while Allied tanks refueled untouched half a mile away. The Anzio landing. Benedetti had reported it 20 miles north of the actual site. The German defensive positions had been dug in the wrong place, facing empty beaches, while the Allies came ashore practically unopposed. 7 operations, 7 intelligence leaks, 7 German disasters. Drummond stood up so fast his chair fell over. He grabbed the intercepts and the operational files and ran down 2 flights of stairs to the records room, where Lieutenant Hastings was cataloging enemy casualty reports. "I need the German loss reports from March," Drummond said. "All of them." Hastings blinked. "Sir, that's going to take—" "Now, Lieutenant." 20 minutes later, they had the numbers spread across a table. German casualties in Italy for March 1944 were running 3 times higher than February. Not because the Allies were fighting better, because the Wehrmacht kept fortifying the wrong positions, ambushing empty roads, preparing for attacks that never came, while real attacks hit them from unexpected directions. "Jesus Christ," Hastings whispered. "He's been giving them garbage." "Not garbage," Drummond said slowly. "Perfect inverse intelligence. Everything backwards, every single time. But that means—" Hastings trailed off, understanding dawning. "He's been working for us?" "No one recruited him," Drummond said. "I've seen every agent file, every asset roster. Benedetti's name isn't on any of them." They stared at each other across the table covered in casualty reports and intercepts. Outside, someone was teaching Italian phrases to a group of replacements fresh off the boat. Drummond could hear Benedetti's voice, patient, friendly, the voice of a man everyone trusted, explaining how to ask for directions. "So what is he?" Hastings asked. Drummond gathered up the files. "That," he said, "is what we're going to find out." He found Captain Reynolds smoking outside Building C, watching Benedetti through a window as the translator worked through a stack of German radio intercepts, marking them up with notes in his careful handwriting. 7 operations, Drummond said quietly. Every one of them a German disaster because Benedetti fed them false intelligence. But he's also been giving us intelligence about German positions. Good intelligence, stuff he shouldn't have access to. Reynolds exhaled smoke. "How good?" "Perfect. That artillery position we hit last week outside Casino, the one that saved 2nd Battalion from getting shredded. That came from one of Benedetti's translations. He flagged it as important, gave exact coordinates. Our boys confirmed it when they went in. The guns were exactly where he said they'd be. So he's a double agent working for us. Except we never recruited him," Drummond said. "And he's been sending intelligence to the Germans under his own initiative. Which means he's a German agent who switched sides? Then why not just come to us? Why keep feeding the Germans bad intelligence? Why not ask for protection, for payment, for something?" Drummond crushed his cigarette under his boot. What kind of spy works for 6 months and never asks for anything? Through the window, Benedetti looked up from his work and smiled at something another translator said. Easy. Relaxed. A man with no visible cares beyond getting through another shift, translating intercepts about artillery positions and supply movements. A man who was somehow running the most successful intelligence deception in the Italian theater, while making it look like he was just doing his job. Reynolds was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What do you want to do?" Drummond watched Benedetti return to his translations, the same careful attention he'd seen for 6 months. The same man who'd saved 2nd Battalion without anyone knowing. The same man who'd sent German divisions to defend empty beaches. "Bring him in," Drummond said, "but quietly, and get Colonel Wainwright on a plane from London. If anyone can figure out what Benedetti actually is, it's him." Inside Building C, Marco Benedetti made a notation on an intercept about German tank movements and added it to the stack of completed translations. The numbers were accurate. The positions were real. The intelligence would save Allied lives, same as it had been doing for 6 months. Tonight, he'd sent another message to his German handlers in Rome. Tell them the Allies were planning something they weren't. Watch the Wehrmacht deploy to the wrong place again. Honor a promise he'd made to a dead woman in a bombed-out bakery. No one had recruited him for this. No one had asked. That was fine. Lucia wouldn't have waited for permission to do the right thing either. He lit a cigarette and reached for the next intercept. Just another translator doing his job, while the Allies he was saving prepared to arrest him for treason. Colonel Marcus Wainwright arrived in Bari with the confidence of a surgeon who had never lost a patient. The legendary British interrogator carried his leather briefcase like a toolkit of certainties, each file inside a scalpel designed to cut through deception. He'd broken 3 Abwehr networks, extracted confessions from hardened SS officers, turned double agents who thought themselves untouchable. The Benedetti case was supposed to be routine. A rogue Italian translator, no training, no tradecraft. 48 hours, Wainwright estimated, 72 at most. The interrogation room smelled of concrete and yesterday's sweat. Benedetti sat in the metal chair with his hands folded, looking like a man waiting for a bus, not nervous, not defiant, just present. When Wainwright entered, spreading intercept across the table with the precision of a card dealer, Benedetti glanced at the documents without particular interest. "Mr. Benedetti," Wainwright's voice carried the cultured authority of Cambridge and 2 decades of peeling lies from desperate men. "We have your transmissions to German intelligence in Rome. We have the radio codes. We have acknowledgments from your handlers. What we don't have is an explanation for why you're destroying the people who recruited you." Benedetti lit a cigarette from the pack on the table. American luckies. They'd let him keep them. "I'm not certain what you mean, Colonel." Wainwright slid a decoded intercept forward. "March 8th. You told the Abwehr that Allied forces were massing at Anzio for a northern push. The Germans moved 2 panzer divisions to block it. We went south instead. Those divisions were slaughtered by airstrikes while out of position." "If you say so." March 15th. You reported Allied supply convoys would use the coastal road. The Wehrmacht set up ambush positions and mines. We used the mountain routes. Their entire defensive preparation was wasted. Benedetti exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. The single bulb cast his face in planes of light and shadow. "I translate documents, Colonel. I don't plan military operations." For 3 days, Wainwright built his case like a prosecutor who'd never seen acquittal. He showed Benedetti the radio, equipment they'd found hidden in his quarters, amateur but functional. He presented evidence of his access to operational briefings in Building C. He laid out the timeline, 6 months of perfect German intelligence that was perfectly wrong. "Who recruited you for the Allies?" "No one recruited me, sir." "Then who are you working for?" "The translation pool, officially." "Stop being clever. Why are you feeding false intelligence to the Germans?" Benedetti stubbed out his 5th cigarette of the session. "I don't know what you're talking about." Wainwright tried everything. Sleep deprivation, Benedetti dozed in his chair between questions. Confrontation with evidence, he acknowledged nothing. Offers of money, protection, relocation to America, all met with that same mild disinterest. On the 4th day, Wainwright played his final card. "We found your real identity, Mr. Benedetti. Or should I say, Signor Vittorio Benedetti Rossini, son of Deputy Minister Benedetti who served under Mussolini until 1941. Wainwright watched for the flinch, the tell. "Your family has connections to both sides. Perhaps you're playing a deeper game than we thought." For the first time, something crossed Benedetti's face, not fear, not anger, something closer to exhaustion. My father was a mid-level bureaucrat who stamped papers and tried to keep his head down, Benedetti said quietly. When he objected to racial laws in '38, they demoted him. When he objected to the war, they pensioned him off. He died in '42, believing that reasonable men could have prevented all of this if they'd just spoken up sooner. He was wrong. Reasonable men don't prevent wars. They just die disappointed. That's a lovely story. It doesn't explain your actions. No, Benedetti agreed. It doesn't. Wainwright tried for another 12 hours. He presented intercepted German communications showing increasing distrust of Aquila's intelligence. He detailed the lives saved by Benedetti's interference, British units at Monte Cassino who didn't walk into prepared kill zones, American convoys that avoided ambushes. He appealed to patriotism, to logic, to self-preservation. Benedetti smoked, answered questions with polite evasions, gave nothing. At dawn on the 5th day, Wainwright closed his briefcase. His hands were steady, but his jaw was tight. In 15 years of interrogations, he'd never failed to extract at least one useful piece of information. Never walked away without understanding the basic architecture of a man's motivations. His final report landed on Major Drummond's desk that afternoon. Subject demonstrates no detectable fear response, offers no ideological justification for actions, shows no interest in monetary compensation, protection, or advancement, refuses to identify recruitment source or handling protocols, maintains consistent denial despite overwhelming evidence of intelligence activities benefiting Allied operations. Assessment. Subject operates under motivation outside standard intelligence frameworks, ideology, mercenary interest, blackmail, or patriotism. Conventional interrogation methods have proven entirely ineffective. Recommendation. Assign to officer with unconventional approach. Subject will not break under traditional pressure. Wainwright caught the next transport to London, carrying the first professional failure of his career in his leather briefcase alongside his other certainties. In the interrogation room, Benedetti sat alone, surrounded by cigarette butts and unanswered questions. The single bulb hummed. Through the small window, he could see the Italian sky turning the color of rose petals, the same shade it had been the afternoon Lucia died under an Allied bomb. The door opened. A young woman in an American lieutenant's uniform entered, carrying a cardboard box. "I'm Lieutenant Chen," she said. "I'm here to catalog your personal effects." Benedetti nodded. The cigarettes were theirs. Everything else is mine. She pulled a chair up to the table, not across from him but adjacent, and started making notes. Not an interrogator, just someone doing inventory. After 15 minutes of silence broken only by the scratch of her pen, Benedetti almost relaxed. Almost. The expert had failed because he'd brought expertise to a problem that existed outside expertise. You couldn't interrogate a ghost. You couldn't break a man who had already been broken by something larger than any pressure an intelligence service could apply. The photograph that would crack the case wasn't in Wainwright's files. It was wrapped in wax paper in a shaving kit, protected like something precious, waiting for someone who knew how to look for what people guarded rather than what they admitted. Lieutenant Sarah Chen folded the interrogation transcript and set it on her desk. 5 days. 4 expert interrogators. 0 useful information. Colonel Wainwright had left for London that morning, his legendary reputation slightly tarnished by the Italian translator who simply wouldn't break. "Just catalog his effects," Major Drummond had told her, "for the record," which meant, "You're junior, this is solved, we're moving on." The supply closet serving as evidence storage smelled like dust and old paper. Benedetti's possessions fit in a single cardboard box. Chen pulled on cotton gloves and began her inventory. 1 wool jacket, Italian make, worn elbows. 2 shirts. 1 pair of trousers. A copy of Dante's Inferno in Italian, pages soft from repeated reading. A small wooden box containing spare buttons and a broken watch. She picked up the shaving kit last. Standard military issue, probably acquired from the Allied quartermaster. She opened it methodically. Razor, soap, brush, small mirror. The bottom felt wrong. Too thick. Chen pressed the edges. The false bottom popped up with a soft click. Inside, wrapped in wax paper like something precious, like something that needed protecting from water and time and careless handling. A photograph. A young woman stood in front of a bakery, wearing a white apron dusted with flour. Dark hair pulled back. She was laughing at whoever held the camera mid-sentence, caught in a moment of pure joy. Behind her, through the shop window, Chen could make out shelves of bread. On the back, in careful Italian script, Lucia, San Lorenzo, Roma, 1941. Chen stared at the photograph for a long moment. Then she went to find the filing cabinets. 3 hours later, she had a name, Lucia Rossini, age 24, last known address, Via dei Campani, San Lorenzo District, Rome. Family occupation, bakery, established 1923. The district name triggered something. Chen pulled the bombing assessment reports, July 19, 1943, first American bombing of Rome. Target, railway yards in San Lorenzo District. Results, 1,674 civilian casualties. Collateral damage, extensive residential destruction. She found the specific damage report. Via dei Campani, bakery, direct hit. 12 minutes past 1 in the afternoon, lunch service. 23 civilians confirmed dead inside. Chen sat back in her chair. She thought about Wainwright's 4-day interrogation. All the questions about ideology, about money, about German recruitment methods, about everything except the one thing that mattered. She picked up the photograph again. The woman, Lucia, frozen in that moment of laughter. 1941, 3 years ago, before the Americans bombed her neighborhood, before she became a name on a casualty report. Chen signed out the photograph from evidence and walked to the interrogation wing. Benedetti sat in the same chair he'd occupied for 5 days. He looked up when she entered, no particular expression on his face. No fear, no hope, no calculation. Just a man who'd answered 1,000 questions and planned to answer 1,000 more the same way. Chen set the photograph on the table between them. For the first time since his arrest, Benedetti's composure cracked. Not much, just his hands tightening where they rested on his knees. But enough. "Tell me about Lucia," Chen said. Silence. Benedetti stared at the photograph. "She had nothing to do with the war," he said finally. His voice was quiet, stripped of the polite evasiveness he'd used with Wainwright. "She just made bread." Chen slid the bombing assessment report across the table. July 19, 1943, San Lorenzo District. The Americans said they were targeting railway yards. The Americans bombed a residential neighborhood at lunchtime, Benedetti said. Each word came out precise, controlled, like he'd said them to himself 1,000 times. Lucia was serving customers. 23 people died in the bakery. "And you blame the Allies." "I blamed everyone." He picked up the photograph with careful fingers. The Germans for bringing the war to Rome. The Americans for dropping bombs without caring where they landed. The Italian government for... He stopped. Chen waited. Outside, she could hear voices in the corridor. Someone laughed. "The ordinary sounds of a headquarters at war. But you're helping the Allies destroy Germans," she said. "Why?" Benedetti looked at the photograph for a long time. His thumb traced the edge, following a crease from being folded and unfolded too many times. "Because Lucia would have hated what I became if I chose revenge." He set the photograph down gently, like it might shatter. "She used to feed people who couldn't pay. German soldiers when they first occupied Rome. American POWs the Italians held before 43. Fascists. Partisans. She didn't care. Hungry people need bread, she said. That's all." He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "She would have called me a fool for thinking killing more people would honor her memory. For thinking another bakery bombed, another woman like her dead, would somehow balance the equation. He exhaled smoke. So I decided the fastest way to end the war was to help the side that would win. The side with more money, more weapons, more of everything. I make the Germans lose faster. Maybe fewer bakeries get bombed. Maybe fewer women like Lucia die serving bread at lunchtime. Chen wrote in her notebook, but she was thinking about the intercepts. 7 major operations. Each one a German disaster because Benedetti had inverted the intelligence. How many Allied soldiers came home because of false coordinates sent to a radio operator in Rome? How many German positions got overrun because their reinforcements went to the wrong sector? "You're not doing this for the Allies," she said. "No. You're doing it for her. I'm doing it because she would have wanted the killing to stop. And this is the fastest way I could find to make that happen." He met Chen's eyes directly. "The Germans are losing. Everyone knows it. I'm just helping them lose faster, before more neighborhoods like San Lorenzo get bombed, before more women like Lucia die. Who recruited you? How did you make contact with German intelligence? Where are you getting information about their positions?" Benedetti smiled slightly. "Those are Colonel Wainwright's questions, Lieutenant. I gave him the same answer I'll give you. I don't know what you're talking about." Chen closed her notebook. "You can't be controlled. No. You won't work officially for Allied intelligence. No. You blame us for killing Lucia. Yes." He picked up the photograph again. "But she would have blamed me for letting that grief make me help the Germans. So here we are. I help you win faster, and you keep asking questions I won't answer." Chen stood. She held out her hand. After a moment, Benedetti gave her the photograph. She wrapped it carefully in the wax paper, the way she'd found it. "You'll get this back," she said. "Will I? You'll need it. To remember what you're doing this for." She walked to the door, then stopped. How many Allied soldiers would have died in those 7 operations if the Germans had been in the right positions? Benedetti was quiet for a moment. "I don't count Allied lives saved, Lieutenant. I count days until the war ends, and no more bakeries burn. The math is simpler that way." Chen's report to the review board was 3 pages. The relevant section, the part that would get her ignored by senior officers who'd already decided Benedetti was solved. Subject motivated by personal grief, rationalized into pragmatic pacifism, refuses official recruitment because he blames both Allied and Axis forces for fiancé's death in July 1943 bombing of Rome. Will continue providing intelligence because he believes accelerating Allied victory will minimize total civilian casualties. Cannot be controlled through conventional leverage, money, ideology, blackmail, because his motivation is deeper than institutional loyalty. Recommend acceptance of situation rather than attempted recruitment. Subject will remain effective as long as his calculus, help Allies win faster to end war sooner, remains valid. At the bottom, a handwritten note. We didn't recruit him. We won't control him. But he's saving Allied lives anyway. Sometimes the best intelligence assets are the ones who were never really ours to begin with. Major Drummond read it twice. Then he put it in his locked desk drawer and began drafting the official report that would recommend removing Benedetti from sensitive operations. Some things you couldn't tell a review board. Some victories you had to accept, even when they came wrapped in wax paper and grief. The review board convenes at 0900 hours, March 23rd. 10 men in a windowless room that smells of floor wax and institutional certainty. Colonel Wainwright stands at the head of the table, Chen's report held between 2 fingers like something that might contaminate him. "Pragmatic pacifism," he reads aloud, investing the words with measured disdain. "That's Lieutenant Chen's professional assessment of an intelligence asset we cannot contact, cannot direct, and cannot control." Major Drummond watches from his seat against the wall. He'd requested observer status only, keeping himself outside the direct line of fire. The 6 board members, 3 American, 3 British, study copies of Chen's report with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright dismissal. The subject has provided actionable intelligence on 7 operations. Wainwright continues. Each time, German forces suffered catastrophic losses. Lieutenant Chen's recommendation is that we, and I quote, accept the situation rather than attempt recruitment. He sets the report down with theatrical precision. Gentlemen, in 23 years of intelligence work, I have never encountered a more dangerous precedent. Chen sits rigid in the witness chair, hands folded on the table. Drummond recognizes the posture. Someone preparing to defend ground they know they're going to lose. Lieutenant Chen, Brigadier General Morrison, leans forward. You're asking us to trust a man who refuses to explain his motivations, refuses official contact, and blames both sides for his fiancée's death? I'm asking you to use intelligence that has saved hundreds of Allied lives, sir. Intelligence we cannot verify or direct. We've verified it 7 times. The results speak for themselves. Wainwright picks up another file. Let's discuss these results. Operation Shingle at Anzio. Benedetti's false intelligence caused the Germans to misposition 3 panzer divisions. Correct? Yes, sir. Do we know how he obtained the actual German positions he fed us? Chen's jaw tightens. No, sir. Do we know his communication method with his German handlers? We found the radio equipment. We have the codes. Do we know his backup communication methods? His emergency protocols? His handler's identity? No, sir. Wainwright spreads his hands. So we have a lone operator with unknown intelligence sources, unknown communication methods, and unknown loyalties beyond personal grief. And Lieutenant Chen recommends we continue using his intelligence without question. With verification, sir, as we've been doing, until the day it's wrong. Wainwright's voice drops. Until the day his grief turns to rage. Until the day the Germans discover him and feed him information designed to kill our men. We'd have no warning, no control, no way to pull him out. The room falls silent. Drummond watches Chen's hands tighten into fists. Permission to respond, sir, she says quietly. Morrison nods. Chen stands, facing the board directly. Everything Colonel Wainwright says is correct. Benedetti is outside our control. We can't recruit him because he doesn't want to be recruited. He's helping us not because he loves the Allies, but because he calculates we'll win faster. She pauses. But in 6 months, he has provided perfect intelligence. Not good intelligence. Perfect. 0 errors. 0 Allied casualties from information he's provided. Meanwhile, German casualties from his false intelligence exceed 1,500. Past performance. Wainwright begins. Let me finish, sir. Chen's voice stays level, but there's steel underneath. We didn't recruit him. We didn't train him. We don't pay him. He does this work for a dead woman who used to feed people regardless of their uniform. That motivation, honoring someone who believed hungry people deserved bread, has proven more reliable than any recruited asset in this theater. Sentiment, Wainwright says, is not a foundation for intelligence work. No, sir. Results are. And Benedetti has delivered results we couldn't achieve with conventional assets. Drummond watches the board members exchange glances. He sees the calculation happening behind their eyes. The institutional immune system preparing to reject the foreign tissue, no matter how effectively it's been keeping the patient alive. Lieutenant Colonel Patterson, British intelligence liaison, speaks for the first time. The question isn't whether Benedetti has been effective. It's whether we can build sustainable intelligence operations on the foundation of one man's uncontrollable grief. We're not building operations on it, Chen says. We're using an advantage that happened to fall into our lap. There's a difference. Is there? Patterson straightens his papers. Because what you're describing sounds like we become dependent on an asset we cannot direct. What happens when Rome falls? When the war moves north? When his personal objectives no longer align with ours? Then we stop using his intelligence, sir. But right now, today, those objectives align perfectly. And tomorrow? Chen has no answer for that. Morrison clears his throat. Lieutenant, you state in your report that Benedetti refused Colonel Wainwright's offers of protection and payment, that he showed no interest in official recruitment. In your assessment, what would make him stop providing intelligence? Chen considers carefully. If he believed we were deliberately targeting civilians, if he thought we'd become the same as what killed Lucia, or if, she hesitates. Continue, Lieutenant. If he successfully avenged her death by helping us win. Once the war ends, his motivation ends. He'll disappear. Disappear, Wainwright repeats. Into civilian life, carrying knowledge of Allied codes, operations, and methodology. Carrying knowledge he's never used against us, sir. Yet. Drummond watches Chen's shoulders sag fractionally. The word hangs in the air like smoke. Yet. The future tense that justifies any present caution. The institutional escape hatch that transforms demonstrated reliability into theoretical threat. Morrison glances at his fellow board members. Small nods ripple around the table. The silent consensus Drummond has seen doom 100 good ideas. Lieutenant Chen, Morrison says formally, thank you for your analysis. Please wait outside while the board deliberates. Chen gathers her papers and exits, not looking at anyone. Drummond stays perfectly still against the wall, trying to be furniture. The deliberation takes 11 minutes. Morrison speaks first. Gentlemen, I don't think we need extended discussion. The intelligence value is clear. The security risk is equally clear. We cannot set a precedent, Wainwright adds, that uncontrolled, unmotivated assets are acceptable. What message does that send to our recruited network, to our training programs? The man refuses money, refuses recruitment, and refuses to explain his intelligence sources. Patterson taps the table. In any other context, we'd classify him as a hostile agent running a deception operation. Except his deception operation targets the Germans, one of the American colonels objects. Effectively. This time, Wainwright says, we have no guarantee of next time. Drummond watches the voting happen through facial expressions. Before hands ever rise. The institutional preservation instinct overwhelming tactical advantage. The certainty that control matters more than results. Morrison calls the vote. All in favor of removing Subject Benedetti from access to sensitive intelligence and reassigning him to low-level translation duties under supervision? 4 hands rise immediately. A 5th after a pause. Opposed? 2 hands. Drummond notices they belong to the youngest men on the board. Motion carries 4-2. Major Drummond, please draft orders effective immediately. Benedetti is to be transferred to the translation pool for routine prisoner interrogation transcripts. No access to operational planning. No access to classified briefings. Standard security monitoring. Drummond nods once. This board stands adjourned. The officers file out, already discussing lunch. Wainwright pauses at the door, catching Drummond's eye. For a moment, something like regret crosses his face. He really was quite good, Wainwright says quietly. Pity we couldn't control him. Yes, sir. Pity. When the room empties, Drummond sits alone with Chen's report. He reads her final paragraph again. The subject's motivation may be unconventional, but its effectiveness is measurable. We have an opportunity to use an intelligence source that costs us nothing and produces exceptional results. Recommendation: accept we cannot control him. Verify his information through alternative channels. Use it while our objectives align. Acknowledge this is temporary. Plan accordingly. Reasonable, pragmatic, results-oriented. Completely unacceptable to an institution that values control over victory. Drummond pulls out a blank operations order and begins drafting Benedetti's transfer to harmless obscurity. His pen moves across the paper in official language, following the board's instructions exactly. But in his desk drawer, he has other papers, a list of contacts, back-channel communications, ways to keep a ghost operating outside official channels while maintaining perfect deniability. He'd rather win the war than follow protocol. If that makes him a bad intelligence officer, So be it. In the corridor outside, Chen leans against the wall, eyes closed. She doesn't need to ask how the vote went. The institutional immune system has done what institutional immune systems do: protected itself by rejecting the thing keeping it alive. In a cell 2 buildings away, Benedetti smokes an American cigarette and thinks about a bakery that no longer exists, and a woman who used to feed people, regardless of their uniforms. The committee has decided he's too dangerous to use. In 6 weeks, their decision will cost hundreds of Allied lives they could have saved. But protocol will be satisfied. Major Peter Drummond stood alone in the rubble of Via dei Campani, watching a man he'd been ordered to forget place flowers where a bakery used to be. May 8th, 1944. Rome. The city erupted in celebration, church bells, crying women, American flags draped from broken windows. The liberation that was supposed to take 2 weeks had collapsed in 36 hours. German defensive positions shattered. Wehrmacht forces scattered north in disarray. Allied casualties, 273. The projected number for a frontal assault on prepared defenses, 3,000 to 5,000. Drummond knew exactly why. The man with the flowers, Marco Benedetti, straightened from the pile of brick and mortar that had once been Rossini's bakery. He didn't acknowledge Drummond's presence, just stood there, staring at a foundation where 23 people had died on a July afternoon 9 months earlier. Drummond had disobeyed direct orders to be here. After the review board's vote in March, Benedetti had been reassigned to supervised translation work, menus, propaganda leaflets, nothing sensitive. Official contact prohibited. The intelligence stream should have dried up. Instead, Drummond had received 17 pieces of actionable intelligence through a courier network he'd built in deliberate violation of every protocol that mattered to men like Wainwright. German artillery positions, supply depot locations, troop movement schedules. Every single piece verified, every single piece used, including the one that won Rome. You had them pull troops from San Lorenzo specifically, Drummond said. Benedetti didn't turn. I told them the Allies were massing for an assault here, partisans gathering, tunnels under the district. They moved 2 companies north to reinforce the coastal defenses. You knew we weren't going anywhere near San Lorenzo. Yes. You let the partisans take it bloodlessly. Benedetti finally looked at him. The man's face showed the weight of 6 months living 2 lives, feeding false intelligence to Germans who thought he was theirs, feeding real intelligence to Allies who'd voted to discard him because they couldn't put him on an organizational chart. Lucia would have wanted her neighborhood freed without more people dying in her bakery. Benedetti said quietly. What's left of her bakery? Drummond pulled a crumpled pack of Lucky Strikes from his pocket, offered one. They smoked in silence while American jeeps roared past, GIs hanging off the sides, throwing chocolate to children who'd been hiding in basements 2 days ago. The review board was wrong, Drummond said. The review board followed their training. Benedetti examined the cigarette like it contained something worth studying. Control the asset, verify the loyalty, establish the leverage. I gave them none of those things. You gave us Rome in 36 hours. I gave you what served my purpose. It happened to serve yours. A jeep full of celebrating soldiers nearly clipped them, swerving around the corner with horns blaring. One of them recognized Drummond, saluted drunkenly. The major waved them on. How long have you been getting German intelligence? Drummond asked. The question he'd never gotten answered in interrogation, briefings, or Chen's careful report. Benedetti smiled slightly. You want to know my sources? Professional curiosity. My father worked in Mussolini's foreign ministry. Minor position, but he knew people. When he realized what was coming, he built relationships with men who thought like him. Diplomats who saw the war as madness. After he died, some of them remembered his son. Benedetti tapped ash onto broken brick. When I started feeding the Germans false intelligence, I needed to know real German positions to make the lies plausible. So I asked my father's friends. They gave me what I needed, thinking I was helping end this faster. Were they right? Every person who gives me intelligence thinks I'm working for their side, Benedetti said. The Germans think I'm Abwehr. Your Major Drummond thinks I'm helping the Allies. My father's diplomatic friends think I'm building an independent Italy. Everyone sees what they want to see. And what are you actually doing? Benedetti crushed the cigarette under his boot, turned to face Drummond fully. Counting days. Every day the war continues is another day someone else's Lucia doesn't come home. Every German who dies in the wrong position because I lied is one who isn't shooting at your soldiers. Every Allied soldier who lives because I gave you their artillery coordinates is one who doesn't have someone putting flowers on ruins. He pulled the photograph from his jacket, the one Chen had found, the one that broke the case open. Lucia Rossini, laughing in front of her family's bakery, 1941. Before American bombs and German occupation, and a world where making bread could get you killed. She used to feed German soldiers, Benedetti said, after they occupied Rome. Wehrmacht infantry, just boys, half-starved. She'd give them day-old bread, wouldn't take their money. I asked her why once. She said, "They're just hungry. The politics isn't their fault." Drummond watched an old woman emerge from a building across the street, crossing herself, crying. Liberation tears or grief tears, impossible to tell. The bombing report said the target was railway yards, Drummond said carefully. The bombing report lied. Benedetti's voice went flat. I've seen the American target maps, saw them in your files when I worked in Building C. The bombardier was aiming at residential blocks. Your air command knew. They chose area bombing over precision because it was easier. Drummond didn't argue, couldn't argue. He'd seen the same maps, the same casualty assessments, the same cold mathematics that said civilian deaths were acceptable if they disrupted German logistics. You blame us, Drummond said. I blame everyone. The Germans for bringing the war to Rome, the Americans for not caring where the bombs landed, Mussolini for choosing the wrong side, my father for believing reasonable men could prevent this. Benedetti returned the photograph to his jacket. But blame doesn't end wars. Results end wars. So I chose the side that would win fastest. Not because you believe in us. I don't believe in anyone anymore, Major. I believe in arithmetic. You have more planes, more ships, more soldiers, more money. The math says you win. The math also says the longer this takes, the more Lucias die. So I make it faster. A partisan emerged from a side street, rifle slung over his shoulder, leading 3 captured Wehrmacht soldiers with their hands up. The German boys, none looked older than 20, walked past the bakery ruins without seeing them. Probably didn't even know what had happened here. Benedetti watched them pass. Those 3 will live. If German intelligence had been better, they'd have been positioned where your advance hit hardest. They'd be dead. Instead, they're prisoners. They go home eventually. You're keeping score. Someone should. Drummond pulled out a folded paper from his jacket. His own orders, typed 2 weeks ago, never filed. The review board wanted you removed from all intelligence work, supervised translation only. No access to operations, no classified briefings. I know. Lieutenant Chen told me. I didn't follow those orders. I know that too. You kept sending intelligence anyway. Through dead drops, courier networks, anonymous messages. You knew I was using it. Benedetti lit another cigarette. Did you think I was sending it for the exercise? I'm ending my career for this. When Wainwright finds out I've been running an unauthorized source, he won't find out from me. That's not the point. Then what is the point, Major? Drummond looked at the celebration swirling around them. Freedom purchased with intelligence from a man who hated both sides, who worked for neither, who couldn't be controlled or recruited or even properly thanked. The point is you won this city, Drummond said. Your intelligence put us on the right approach vector. Your false feeds stripped the German defenses. You coordinated partisan actions through information you shouldn't have had access to. And I can't tell anyone because officially, you're just a translator who got caught spying and reassigned. Good. Good? If they knew, they'd try to control me again. Send Wainwright back, or someone worse. Offer me money, citizenship, protection. Try to make me theirs. Benedetti exhaled smoke. I'm not theirs, Major Drummond. I'm not yours. I'm Lucia's. Every German position I expose, every Allied life I save, every day I shorten this war, that's for her. The moment your objectives stop serving that purpose, I stop helping you. And when the war ends? When the war ends, I disappear. No debriefings, no medals, no official records. I go back to being nobody. A British officer Drummond recognized, Captain Reynolds from Intelligence Coordination, approached, saluting. Sir, Colonel Wainwright's asking for you. Wants a debrief on the Rome operation, specifically how we got intelligence on German defensive positions. Drummond returned the salute. Tell him I'm following up on a lead. 20 minutes. Reynolds departed. Benedetti watched him go, amused. What will you tell him? That we got lucky. Partisan intelligence, German radio intercepts, reconnaissance confirmation. Nothing about unauthorized sources. You're protecting me. I'm protecting the war effort. You're the best intelligence asset we have, and the review board voted to throw you away because you didn't fit their procedures. Drummond dropped his cigarette, crushed it. The night before D-Day, I'll be in the same position, knowing things I can't explain how I know, using intelligence I can't attribute, hoping to God you're still sending it. I will be. Why are you so sure? Benedetti looked at the bakery ruins one more time. Because ending this war faster means fewer D-Days, fewer beaches with bodies, fewer mothers getting telegrams. Lucia would want that. They stood in the wreckage of Via dei Campani, a British-trained American intelligence officer and an Italian who worked for no one, both of them breaking every rule that mattered to the men who made the rules. Your report recommended otherwise, and yet here you are.